In part one of our look at the U.S. military's network of foreign bases, Miriam Pemberton explained that the U.S. maintains roughly 1,000 bases outside of its borders, excluding the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, at a cost to the U.S. taxpayer of approximately $100 billion per year. For a better understanding of these bases and the roles they play, The Real News dug into one such location in South Korea, a country that 25,000 U.S. troops call home. Most of those troops are moving into a brand new $13 billion garrison in Pyeongtaek.
The major base in South Korea was, of course, the Yongsan base in Seoul, and it occupied this major territory right in the middle of the city. I mean, if you can imagine Central Park suddenly being a military base in New York City. And it was also the location of a former Japanese military base, which, of course, the Japanese were occupiers of Korea in the first part of the 20th century. So this continuity was not always appreciated by Koreans. This relocation encountered considerable resistance from the inhabitants of Pyeongtaek. It was basically rammed down their throat by both the United States and the South Korean government. They resisted. They did a pretty good job of resisting, but it was very difficult to do so. They got a lot of media attention. Again, they got international support, but they were up against some pretty substantial firepower from the United States and the South Korean government. They had a number of arguments. They argued specifically for the environmental and social costs that associated with a military base in South Korea. So traditionally in South Korea, there have been prostitution, enormous amount of prostitution around the military bases. There's the cost of the crimes that are committed by U.S. soldiers, and in Korea those have included murder, rape, theft. There are the environmental costs, and some of those environmental costs are very obvious. I mean, there's noise pollution from all of these very, very loud jets. There's the mistakes that jets make when they're going on bombing runs, and the bombs fall in the wrong places. There's the environmental costs of all the trash and all the chemicals that are produced on a military base. They also made a larger argument that these bases cost the South Korean government.
The South Korean government is providing 90% of the $13 billion for the base.
Camp Humphreys is undergoing one of the largest transformations in the history of the Army and is rapidly on its way to becoming the Army's premier place to live, work, and play.
It is clear from their financial commitment that the South Korean administration wants the U.S. there. But what do the South Korean people think about this?
Public opinion has generally been expressed about the U.S. alliance in general, and it waxes and wanes. I mean, public opinion in South Korea is extraordinarily volatile. So for instance, at any given point you'll find a poll that will say that the United States is the greatest threat to peace in the region. This tension between fears of abandonment and fears of embrace with the United States compete in the body politic as well as in public opinion polls. They're very upset about many of the things that the United States Army does in Korea. If you ask the question after the two young girls were killed by a U.S. transport vehicle back in 2003, and you're going to get some very strong feelings against the U.S. Army. And at the same time, they're very fearful of U.S. withdrawal, a latent fear of regional instability, not just from North Korea. South Korea fears, just like North Korea fears, Japan kind of remilitarizing, and it would prefer the United States to Japan. Latent fears about China as well.
The U.S.-South Korea alliance has been in the spotlight of late as North Korea prepares to launch a new rocket with the stated purpose of positioning a satellite for domestic use. Meanwhile, the leadership of South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. have contended that the launch is actually a test of a new long-range ballistic missile. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited South Korea in February.
I commend the people of South Korea and your leaders for your calm resolve and determination in the face of the provocative and unhelpful statements and actions by the North.
Since that time, North Korea has gone on to announce that it can no longer guarantee the safety of South Korean commercial flights in its airspace. For its part, North Korea claims it is only responding to what it believes to be the region's real provocative act, March's US-led war games, an exercise North Korea has condemned as a rehearsal for invasion.
Every year, the United States brings together its allies and some observers as well to essentially prepare for a war scenario. It requires an enormous number of troops from around the region, aircraft carriers bringing in jets and so on, and they basically run through a variety of scenarios if war were to break out, how the United States would respond to it. It's actually rather difficult to coordinate, different armies. I mean, you're talking about different languages, different cultures, different weaponry. It's critical from the Pentagon's point of view to hold these exercises in order to actually see what coordination is like, practically speaking. Also to see what the interoperability of these systems are. That takes an enormous amount of support from these military bases. It couldn't be done without these military bases. The other reason, of course, is to send a message to our adversaries of our military strength. In some sense, it's why we bring the observers in as well. We want the Chinese to see exactly how powerful we are. We want the North Koreans to know exactly how powerful we are. And what we want to demonstrate through our exercises is that we have overwhelming power and we have overwhelming conventional power. The problem is, these kinds of exercises achieves exactly the opposite of what we want. Countries who see that say, hey, we got to spend more money on the military. And so we get into that arms race dynamic. Second thing is, if North Korea sees that our conventional forces are so overwhelmingly more powerful than their conventional forces, they say, well, we can't compete. We actually can't compete. China might have the idea that it can compete. North Korea can't. So it says, okay, that just reinforces our desire to get a nuclear deterrent and to keep a nuclear deterrent.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington is a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country is governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the Real News.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk, and to more wars. We think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.